Good morning. This is the cool of the day. In Genesis, it said that Adam walked with his father in the cool of the day. Now, initially, I thought the cool of the day would be nighttime. And then I realized the real cool of the day is just before the sun rises, maybe even a little bit after the sun rises. That's when it's coldest. So we have this little bit of time together here right now. I didn't plan on this, but I'm glad we've got it. My mind's been flooded with a lot of things, a lot of thoughts. And when I get this video camera going, I can't keep them all. I can't bring them all at one time. Because the flood of thoughts is rather enormous. And I just have one mouth. And some of these thoughts are quite divergent. And the contrasts are pretty amazing. Went to sleep last night, put my Bible beside my bed. Didn't read it. And then I shut my cell phone off, which was the smartest thing I did. And I went to sleep with the Bible next to me on the nightstand. And the phone, dead as a doornail, powered down on top of that. This phone doesn't always power down on me properly. I find it awake in the morning sometimes after I powered it down, which doesn't make any sense. No, I'm not liking this phone very much. I mean, it is beautiful. Granted that, beautiful screen. And the latest and the greatest on that is quite simple. I went into the T-Mobile. The tech was really pretty nice. He explained some things to me that I guess I should have known. One in particular, the Google links, change across the day. I forgot that it did that. I usually don't use Google News or Google Alerts, so I'm going to get rid of those again. I do think Google's evil. I don't think it's simple, innocent algorithms or any of that stuff. I think they're manipulative as hell. I really think they're far too powerful. They have too much data, too much information, and I don't think they're using it to our benefit at all. I think they violate our privacy. I think we should have a right to privacy, and we don't have that. And that's one reason why I'll be not so happy to see Roe versus Wade go, is because they declared there was a right to privacy. Now, do you see a right to privacy these days? I don't see any. I think the men who crafted up that Patriot Act, the first one and the second one, I think they're traitors. I think they violated our rights in so many ways under the guise of security that it was treason. Did they achieve our security? Oh no, they didn't achieve that at all. They made us far more vulnerable. Stalin would be envious of the spying network we have here. So the status on my phone is that T-Mobile decided not to replace it after Samsung cleared it and approved it and told them they needed to replace it because T-Mobile believes that it's buggy. And this defect with the port and with the water alert is there's no water where I'm at. There's no humidity where I'm at. I'm not in the deep south where you've got humidity. I'm not even on the coast where there's humidity from waters. It's dry as can be here. So it's definitely a flaw in these phones. Maybe it's just to these 512 gigabyte models. I have heard from one T-Mobile staff at the store I bought this from. He told me he'd seen this before and the phones had to be replaced. Well, my replacement is worse than the original. No, I don't understand the cell phone systems. I don't understand the services that they offer very well. I know that they haven't explained things to me in a totally upfront fashion, and I think that's a language problem. T-Mobile uses girls, mostly from the Philippines, and they're wonderful on the phone. I mean, they're very endearing, they're very charming, they're very feminine, gracious. They're kind of, the old style girls, giggly, and very happy women like we used to have in the 50s and 60s. That giggling has diminished over the years. I mean, when I see a woman today that laughs that much and is that bubbly I think that's the best word to describe it. When I see a woman who's that bubbly, it's kind of endearing, and it's so rare, and even though there's nothing else going on, let's put it that way, and there's no, they're just bubbly, and it's just very delightful because it's just somewhat happy-go-lucky. So T-Mobile decided they didn't want to waste another phone by replacing it because Samsung has got to fix this thing. And Samsung sends me to T-Mobile saying it's the T-Mobile. They're responsible since I bought it from them. So as you can see, I've become a ping pong ball between the two paddles on this game, and I don't want to play ping pong, not anymore. So I can't recommend either. That's right. I'm not recommending T-Mobile, and I'm not recommending Samsung. They aren't taking good care of me. I feel abused. All right, enough of that. What's really going on in the world is that we've got a war going on, and we're not realizing that. We're also at the beginning, we're in a depression, and we're also not realizing that. They've gaslighted us. The government's gaslighted us to the point that we don't understand what the reality is right now. Inflation has ramped up so much that it could be as high as 1/3, 33%. It could be that right now. It's moving so rapidly that we won't be able to understand this for several months, maybe even years. That we might not be able to nail this down and get good statistics for quite a while. I'll have to go look up John Williams on shadow stats. He uses the old style of measurements that the government first came up with for measuring inflation back in the 60s. Look, inflation is just another word for theft. The government steals your money. The government's doing the inflation. They blame it on the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve is being allowed to run a way in which they're robbing us of our assets and robbing we people blind. The Federal Reserve is best likened to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's definitely working on this planet in the background. Now, think about this archetype. Pharaoh was all-powerful. Pharaoh was also emboldened and empowered by the knowledge of Joseph. So Joseph had a role in this. I don't know of a modern Joseph today, but I do think we have Pharaoh. Now, another thing I want you to think about is that the James Bond movies were not exactly total fiction. Those were another means by which our enemy told us what they were going to do to us and revealed the secrets, put them right in our faces in a fashion that we would see these things later and deny the reality. So there's a gentleman in Switzerland who lives out of a tent from what I can see and takes the train, and that's it. His English is pretty good. I think he's German though, but I'm not sure. And he takes videos and shows you the architecture and the symbols in Switzerland. And he keeps referring to them as octagon. He shows us the octagon is their symbol, 8-sided symbol. What else is 8? Well, octopus is 8-sided. And what was the villain's name? and the James Bond novels and the movies. Why, it was, octopus, I believe. So this eight-sided shape, this eight-sided symbol, appears to come out of Pharaoh's time, comes out of Egypt. And there's the other great civilization back there, Babylon. A lot of evil came out of that. A lot of black magic, a lot of stuff. I think the Kabbalah came out of there. That's supposed to be Jewish mysticism. Well, I think that's mysticism that predates the Jews, just like Pharaoh predates the Jews. There were no Jews in Pharaoh's time. You people who think there were Jews are you don't understand the Bible. You don't understand history. If you read the Bible strictly for the text and forgetting those notes with those footnotes, those agendas that are in there, you would figure out they weren't Jews back then. They were Hebrews. Sure, it sounds like Jew. It rhymes with Jew and Hebrew. But the Hebrew name came from Heber, and the H quite often was omitted. So it was Eber. So Hebrew, in the Hebrew language. So it was a language. Very important that you understand this. And even the Bible doesn't mention the Jews until later. So the Jewish faith didn't appear until later. It's kind of like in the last 3 centuries. The Sikh religion didn't appear till later. The Sikh religion is the most recent of the religions on the planet, of the major religions, formal organized religions. That's the newest one. And it is a synthesis from the gurus and somewhat from the Muslim sphere, more from the Hindu probably. But it comes out of those traditions. It comes out of the old yogis. They call them the ancient yogis, but I think that the yogis were still running around the subcontinent of India and plaguing the people. And that's the right word, because these guys would show up with their bowls, and if you didn't fill it with food, if you didn't give them food, then they would put a hex on you. They would use their yogic powers, and they would torment you. So they were leeches on society. Don't know what else to say, but it wasn't a very, very good tradition according to the Sikhs. They don't care that much for the yogis. They like their chanting much more than they like doing yoga. They like the nod. They like the chanting and the altered states, basically, that puts them into. It changes consciousness. It alters consciousness. I know a lot of you want to go into altered states. There was a movie called Altered States, and everybody wanted to have out-of-body experiences. I don't know what's wrong with you folks, man. I want to stay in my body. I prefer to be anchored. Well, out-of-body experiences were just a way of life for me for early years. That's what happens when you're in stressful situations. And that's what's happening to your kids today. Is they're under stress, and you aren't even adult enough to realize that they're under stress. You aren't even adult enough to be aware of what's going on with them. So they're having out-of-body experiences. And believe me, those things have to be integrated at some point. And the integration is a rough deal. It's not always easy. Some of that stuff they go through and they see is pretty ugly. It's not all peaches and whatever, cream, glory, or anything. When you have an out-of-body experience, some of those levels are pretty dangerous, pretty evil, pretty wicked, pretty bad. I don't recommend them. Serious Things said I spent too much time in the ether, and well, yeah, it was a way of coping, a way of dealing with things, splitting oneself off and going somewhere else. What I want you to do is I do want you to like my videos. I'd love to have some comments, hopefully positive ones. I don't want to be trolled. If you send simple comments, I'm not going to acknowledge them. If you send something with substance to it, fine. I've got very few comments. I appreciate the comments, though. They give me some, they inspire me somewhat. They give me some feedback. They help guide me. I hope the audio is good in this. It's early in the morning, no air conditioning on. Don't even have my hearing aids in, just using the mic on the camera. I think it's quite adequate. I think it's a good microphone on this thing. At this point in my life, I see a lot of the biblical archetypes, a lot of the patterns from the Bible, a lot of similar personalities, if you will, similar roles, the Bible characters. I think that the Bible is mimicked in real life. I think a lot of what we're dealing with is patterned after the Bible. And what I mean by that is that my suspicion is that the bad guys are using the Bible. Not only that, those evil guys know the Bible better than we do, better than you, better than me. And they are doing their best to play God by making sure that we suffer those sufferings and those consequences dictated, delineated for us by God, by Yahweh. I don't like using that generic category, God, very much, because I believe we got it from that fallen angel Gadriel, who seduced Eve and fathered Cain. And now that's the one that we have the record of in the Bible. So before you think that it's that simple, I want you to understand that the lesson in the Bible is that simple. And that's there for a reason. But when you dig into it, you find out there were 200 more fallen angels, roughly. So when you had 200 of those guys going and doing all of that hybridization, cross-pollination, creating these hybrids and corrupting the way of all flesh up on the earth, which is what caused that first flood. And you can pride yourselves on diversity. You can pride yourself on mingling and interracial stuff, but I won't do it. I'm scared of it. I'm afraid of the consequences of it. We don't really know that very well. I've got one friend who's read the Bible quite a bit, and he insists, he's weird, his perspectives are different. He insists that if we read the flood of Noah carefully, we discover that they had intermingled, and that's what was meant by all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. I mean, I think of just, they got bad behavior, corrupted its way. Their behavior is bad, okay. But he looks at it as more of a racial thing, if you want, or a hybridization, or a changing of the creation from the order that Yahweh made it. Yahweh, every time he created something in early Genesis, he said it was good. He loved it the way he created it. But we, and especially those fallen angels that left their first estate in heaven, they corrupted it. Can I remind you that I believe this fallen angelic DNA is the strongest DNA on the planet, the most dominant DNA, and that it just takes a little bit of that to change things quite a bit? Maybe that's why they want y'all taking those DNA modifiers. I'm not going to tell you. If you can't figure out what I'm referring to, well, that's your problem. Remember, I'm not allowed to talk about certain things here on this platform. I think they should emphasize things to you, because those DNA modifiers, why would they want to change your DNA? Why would they want to alter the original design? Why would they want to corrupt our ways? I try to explain this to people, including dear friends, and they don't get it. They don't understand it. All I can say is that it may be too late. It may not be too late. I hold on to the idea and the attitude that it's never too late. But on some things, unfortunately, we've made our choices, and now we're stuck with them. What I want for you to do, as well as I want you to buy this Bible, I don't want you to give me any money. I don't want to take any of your money. I don't want your gifts. Oh, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I wish I had the relief of some gifts, but I came up with a philosophy a while back, and the problem is if somebody showed up with a whole bunch of gifts for me, a lot of money or something like that, there would be strings attached, and I don't need any strings attached. And they might actually corrupt my way upon the earth. They might get me to act poorly. They might get me to act in a way contrary to Yahweh. So, if you would like to pray for me, you got to know the name of the Lord, the real one, Yahweh. You got to know the name of the Messiah, Yahshua. And you got to use their names. I am up in the air regarding the term Christian, so I'd rather you use the term Messiah. And as far as what you could pray for me for, there's only one prayer. And Yahshua gave us that example, and that was to pray to know the will of Yahweh and to be able to abide by it. My belief is that Yahweh will give us what he knows we need so we can abide by his will. I believe that by praying and pressing in and trying to learn Yahweh's will and doing Yahweh's will, I believe that is working out one's salvation. I don't follow this liberal delusion that somebody will give me something for nothing, which is why I tend not to take free stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, if I bought a product and they tell you I'm going to get one free, I realize I paid for it, okay? And then the free stuff from the government, well, either I paid for it or I'm going to pay for it or somebody's going to pay for it. I don't think that's a very fair thing, especially when there's no money. There's no wealth. You might think there's money, but that ain't money. That's a curse. That's from Babylon. That's the Babylonian money magic that they're pulling on us. Now, I know you want to say Jesus is pure love. You can say whatever you want about Jesus, but Yahshua, the real name, he got angry, and it was a righteous, proper anger. And he actually gave us great lessons by his example. And just to let you know how furious he was, he took a bunch of ropes. If I read the Bible properly, if I'm reading it right, he took a bunch of ropes, and what did he do with the ropes? He made a whip, the cat o' nine tails, something along those lines. And what did he do with this whip that he fashioned? He drove out the money changers from the temple, off the temple grounds. Was that loving? Was that peaceful? That was pretty violent. And what did it cost him? It cost him his life within the week. But he was trying to... The main thing is he was trying to let us know where the problem was. Now, I told you the bankers met in Jackson Hole, Wyoming in about July 2019, just before they launched this exercise, this worldwide exercise, which was just supposed to be an exercise. It then went live, just like a lot of their exercises go. 9/11 was just an exercise. It went live. There were several other locations in which it was just an exercise preparing for a mass shooting, and it went live. My God, won't you people wake up? I'd make exercises like that illegal because they tend to go live. They confuse the situation. The Kennedy assassination, that kind of was an exercise too. They were supposed to fake the assassination attempt by the Cubans upon the President of the United States, thereby justifying their invasion of Cuba. Well, the gentleman who was the agent of that has since passed away. But there was another CIA operation going on at the same damn time that took it over and whacked the president. And that's what happened. Now, how do I know that? I've read most of Michael Collins Piper's book called The Final Judgment. And that's what's revealed about halfway through, is a senator from Texas said the American people weren't ready to accept the truth. And that was great wisdom. So I want to ask you, are you, the American people, ready to accept the truth? If you are, then demand those records be released according to the law signed by President Bush the Senior. And even though Trump didn't want to release them, they need to be released. Trump said he couldn't release them because it would have taken our government down. I'm all for taking our government down. This current bullshit out of Washington, D.C., the current stressing machine, the current war across the planet, the current bullying machine, the current machine that runs that Patriot Act, the machine that just has probably a CIA asset every mile and a half ready to whack anybody who steps out of line. Yeah. And every one of them's issued a suppressor, a silencer. What are they issued silencers for? Every one of them? That's what my attorney friend the singer said. She used to work for the ATF and she issued those things. She hated guns too. God dang, I mean. She loved the music of Bruce Springsteen. Listen to that stuff. That stuff shouldn't be allowed to be played on the entire continent. You people ought to listen to that. Go ahead. Hear how ugly it was. Bruce Springsteen. Who else was named Springsteen, by the way? Oh, that's right. Abraham Lincoln's name. His real name. Real name should have been Springsteen, but his family was among the name changers, and his father changed his name to Springs. He shortened Springsteen to Springs. Now that was just my guess. It's on the internet though, so it's got to be true, right, boys and girls? Yeah. Well, a Pasor descendant, a woman from the Pasor family, wrote that up on her website. The Pasors appear to be the survivors of Marie Antoinette. So they keep their heads low. They don't want to lose them. I'm not keeping my head that low. I don't mind losing it for a good cause, but I kind of like to keep it attached. If it wasn't attached, I'd probably forget it and leave it somewhere, but it's attached, so I don't leave it anywhere. I need you to buy the Bibles. They make excellent gifts. If you want to do ministry work, prison ministry, or whatever ministry, you got a whole complete Bible. Don't be giving people these isolated New Testaments so that these lying pastors can predate upon them. Yeah, that's what they do. They predate upon you. They make you feel guilty, and then they're in your pockets like you wouldn't believe, and they make all kinds of demands upon you, that really aren't very biblical. You need to read the Bible. You need to understand the Bible. You need to educate yourself. I can't do it for you, but you can tune in here, and you can hear what I have to say and say, gee, where do you get that from? Well, go read the Bible. You'll find out most of what I have is from the Bible. Some of it's not. I admit it. Some of it, there are no references. I am the reference. When I was a kid in grade school, I found out that they always told me, what's your reference? What's your reference, kid? You can't have an original thought. You can't have your own thought. You have to have a reference, because that's the only way it has any validity. You can't come up with it yourself. Man, you go to reading that Bible and you'll come up with things on your own that will be valid. There'll be things that I haven't even thought of, that I am not aware of. Why? Because the Holy Spirit works on each of us differently. Sure, we may be part of the same group, part of the same body, maybe even perhaps the same people, maybe even. But, I mean, the Holy Spirit works upon each of us differently. And I know a lot of you want to give me a bunch of crap about racism and all that. Well, my friend Rudy Dent, may he rest in peace, a famous fireman from the fire department of New York. I didn't realize he was a black man for quite a while. I didn't care. There's a lot of dark-skinned white people out there, if you haven't ever noticed. And there's a lot of light-skinned black people out there, too. Some of them, I mean, there's more variety inside among a race than between races, which basically means there's not much validity to the entire concept. Now, you people who are using racism as a war tool, as a psychosocial political warfare tool, weapon, need to know where it come from. It came from a gentleman who called himself Leon Trotsky, real name Lev Bronstein, out of the Bronx, who became one of, I guess that was, became one of the big generals. He devised that term as a method of psychological warfare to break us down. Make you feel guilty because you're a racist. Break you. Are you a racist? How did he determine that? Well, when you use their terms, you accept their assumptions. I'm no racist. I think we're different species. So if you think that makes me a racist, that's on you. I mean, seriously, folks. These bodies, the DNA we have, has been messed with over the years. We have had interventions, divine and otherwise. And so there's also the interventions that our parents did and their forefathers. So we don't know how much DNA, Cro-Magnon, or adenosine each one of us has. And it varies. So we're all hybrids. Hybridization, and that makes the most sense. That appears to be the most logical, the most rational, the most scientific. So get used to it. Because you need to break out of this psychosocial warfare that Lev Bronstein gave us. And why did he do that? It was a tool to divide us, a tool to get us to go against our own kind, if you will. It was to undermine us, to weaken us from within, and they've done a good job. They won't give up on their racism and their accusations of race. I'm getting tired of it. I don't know about you. The Equal Rights Act, I believe, 1965, civil rights, okay. I got a book. I saved that book. It was written by an attorney named Smith, and he explained the passage of these, of what we have, what I will call systemic racism. It codified systemic racism. It made it the law of the land. It screwed us all up. they were hoping it wouldn't pass. The senators were hoping it wouldn't pass, and the senator from West Virginia got the bright idea that if he made women part of it, that it would never pass. Dumb son of a bitch, it passed. And as a result, women became a protected class. Now, why should women be a protected class? I mean, we protect them, don't we? But when you make them a protected class and you put them at odds against the men, it makes things worse. It destroys the family. You got to destroy the American family if you're going to destroy America, and you have to be patient and willing to do it over several generations. So you get it started and your children take it over. You look at these men in the news, you look at these rich and powerful men, and look at their ancestry. Look at where they came from. Look at their roots, and you'll realize more of what we're dealing with. So I don't recommend intermarriage. I certainly am not going to tell a man who's born from a mixed marriage that he doesn't deserve to exist. I think that's a bad mistake. I mean, does he have a choice? Did he have a choice? No. And don't go blaming the guy. Now, a lot of us are mixes, and most of you don't even know it. Me, I know it. I know I got a little bit. And I know right now that the young man who's carrying on the Kent name is a Negro. Okay? Yeah, I'm related. I haven't kept up with him. I don't know how old he is. He's probably past the age of having a family, but I'm sure his children have had children. So that's the way in which the Kent family is being carried along. The Kent name is far more important than what I realized. I'm only realizing how important it is later in life. You folks want to know how important it is now, because that was the template for our property rights. No, you don't have any property rights. You don't own anything. You aren't even given title. You're given a certificate of title. You're given basically a sheet that says that you've got the responsibilities and the rights, but it doesn't give you any of that stuff. When we started as colonies, we had patented land. And the land patent came as a result of the County of Kent, which is the only county in all of England in which the king granted land a loyal title. And a loyal title was basically awarded to the Kents because of their service to the king and because the Kents had a powerful army. The king depended upon that army. The Kents were a force to be reckoned with. And in case you're wondering, Shakespeare worked on the Kent estate, and we think that the Shakespearean plays, as well as the original version of the King James Bible, were both overseen by a man who wasn't called Kent, never was called Kent. Don't know if I call that being a name changer, though. They had to hide the Queen's son's identity, and so they couldn't even use the name of his father, which was Kent. So they used the name Bacon instead. They hid him as best they could, because had the Queen been caught having an affair, a child out of wedlock, they certainly would have beheaded her back then. So God save the Queen, regardless, right? Well, the Elizabethan era was a magnificent era in terms of language and the art. And my ancestor, well, I won't call him my ancestor, but my distant cousin, should we say, he did all of that. Now, it's my privilege to bring you a better version of the Bible, and that is the proper name version of the King James Bible. What makes it so different? Well, we corrected the error that Ptolemy II introduced in approximately 275 BC. Ptolemy II was in Alexandria, Egypt, and because so many of the Israelites had become Greek, and so many were Greek speaking, that they needed a Bible the Old Testament in the language so that they could understand it. That wasn't a small population. It was probably bigger than the Hebrew, Aramaic speakers that were in the Middle East, in the Promised Land at that point. So the bigger population was outside of Israel. They produced the Septuagint, and some doggone reason, Ptolemy II took it upon himself to take the words of the name Yahweh and change it to God. Not all of them, but most of them. So we've produced a much more accurate Bible, and the differences are amazing. Much better Bible. We're in a war. We're pretty deep into that war. Our government lies to us all the time. I'm not sure what side our government's on. I think our government is against us. They treat us like the enemy, and they are the enemy at this point. The Federal Drug Administration, the FDA, I lovingly called the Federal Death Administration in about 2008, 2009 on the radio. And I was only half joking. This is the Federal Death Administration that's being used against the population. They've killed a huge number of people. Before Trump left office, they killed more than 300, maybe 400,000 Americans with this ploy, if you will, with this combination of problem and solution, of thesis and antithesis, thesis and antithesis. You cannot trust them. It is the Federal Death Administration. And it's one of those weird organizations that I don't think is part of our government. Just like the CDC, it's a private organization holding most of the patents and immunizations. So yeah, they're a neutral, pure, scientific body. My ass. And the World Health Organization, headed up by those communists. Oh, and we've got the best communists in the world in D.C. We've got them. Yeah, they're communists in D.C. Yeah, that's their function. What was that senator in the 50s that tried to reveal it and tried to tell us the truth? He was right. He went after communism. And what did Rabbi Weiss, was it Weiss? Weissman? Weiss? Rabbi Weiss said that he had some saying about equivocating communism with Judaism. It does seem as though there's a couple of different groups of Jews, at least. It does seem as though there's a couple of different groups that are involved in the takedown of the world. Those would be the Illuminati and the Zionists. The Illuminati would probably be above both of those, above the Communist World Revolution and above the Zionist International. I think you'll find that there's a tremendous amount of overlap. Don't let that confuse you. Look at the Bible, Revelations 2:9 and 3:9. It says, and it's Jesus, Yahshua speaking, I know you who say you are Jews or are of Judah and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. So there's spoilers in there. I don't purport to be able to sort them all out myself. So I'm going to tell you, go ahead and try. Apply yourself to it, but don't expect much success. Everything is mixed up to a very large extent. Did you know our Treasury Department dictates which can be preached from the pulpits? And you have to preach that all men came from Adam, which is not biblical. It's not true. But you have to read the Bible to come to this understanding. You have to read it quite well. and probably 3 times before you'll begin to understand that. There were several different species of humans, species of humans, I like that, on the planet. For the most part, the Adamic peoples were here last, placed on Earth last. The Enosh or Enoshwi were here first. Okay. And we have another group that was brought here by the fallen angels as slaves. A relationship they tend to maintain these days. I got that from Wesley Swift. Wesley Swift was murdered. He was poisoned when he was down in Mexico in about 1974. His wife lived many years beyond him. I think she passed away in 2003. Why Wesley Swift? Well, he started talking with Commander Rockwell. What was Rockwell's full name? As I ask the question, I get a brain lock. George Lincoln Rockwell, I believe. His name was George. Commander Rockwell. Commander Rockwell understood the politics and the recent immediate stuff that's going on pretty well. And you got him teaming up with a guy who knew the ancient history real well. And they couldn't allow that because if you listen to Wesley Swift, he's quite a firecracker. He speaks very pressured, very quickly, like a machine gun going off. I mean, it's just nonstop. You have hardly enough time to assimilate the words before the next words come out. So it's a very pressured presentation, kind of eerie, kind of irritating too, kind of haunting. And he would tell us about the number of nuclear weapons that our nation had compared to the Soviet Union's. Tell us we should start the war, that we could win at any time. And he was right at that time. Yeah, we could have won very easily. And the FBI showed up. He was preaching this stuff at church. And the FBI demanded to know where he got his data from, because his data was accurate. So I can't tell you any more to that story, except they didn't appreciate him knowing so much and saying so much publicly. But the problem was, once he teamed up with George Lincoln Rockwell, with Commander Rockwell, who had the dumbest idea to call his party the American Nazi Party. I'm sorry, I know the man was intelligent, but using that word, that mocking word, that that was designed to call them crazy, basically mimic. I don't know. I have to do the research on this sometime. But there was a term that was used for crazy. It sounded like Nazi, or maybe it was for imbecile, something like that, or moron, or retard, or something that mimicked the word Nazi. So I don't know what that word is, but the term Nazi wasn't invented until after the war by a Jewish fellow, Conrad. I can see his picture, famous black and white picture, guy with a hat on, well dressed in a suit. And he coined the term after the war was over. However, there's another meaning for the term, according to Eustace Mullins. It stands for the amalgam, the working together of the National Socialist Party, which is what NA stood for, with the Zionist Party, with the Zionist International, which is what the ZI stood for. And it's quite true that the two joined up so that they could transfer the wealth of the Jews who wanted to stay Germans, actually, who didn't want that war, who didn't want to leave Germany, so they could transfer the wealth out of the country and get the Jews out of the country and start building Israel, modern Israel. I got mixed feelings about Israel. On the one hand, I think it's an illegal state was formed illegally, and the land was stolen, and the Palestinians got shafted. I read Leon Uris's The Hajj, and that's kind of a haunting book, but it's important because it gives you some of the characteristics of the peoples that were involved in that. There aren't any good people in that situation, in case you're wondering, really. There actually was an innocent group that came out of there, so, like they say, don't judge everybody by the color of their skin and all that stuff. Well, it's the same with Middle Easterners. I know most of you think they're dark and swarthy, but I had a blonde-haired, blue-eyed surgeon do a heart procedure on me, and he was from Lebanon. I think his parents immigrated, actually. Okay. So that sure destroyed the archetype, the image I had for a Middle Eastern guy being dark-eyed and swarthy skin to, be able to deal with the desert. Well, it wasn't always desert. It was pretty lush and green, especially back when the cedars were growing in Lebanon, those tall trees. Ain't too many cedars in Lebanon today, but there will be cedars again in Lebanon because the earth goes through its cycles, and it will be time for the promised land to sprout up green again. Now, I got derailed just a little bit, and that's all right. What I think you ought to really think about is the fact that people of a particular persuasion, a particular tribe, are overrepresented in the Biden administration. They're overrepresented in our Supreme Court. They're overrepresented in the halls of power. And don't get me wrong, because there are some mighty fine people that also come out of those tribes. Some of them very critical of themselves and of each other, and they point out the truth. So you can turn to them for honest history about, well, for instance, the slaves and the slave ships, the slave traders. You can turn to their history books and read about them. I don't have time to focus on that. That's not that important to me. We're in a war for survival at this point. Is it a race war? Well, I just don't know. Is it going to become a race war? I just don't know. When I worked in the prisons, that's all the inmates talked about was a coming race war. So it looks like they're going to force something like that upon us. They've got all of these people that are brown and black and whatever, green, blue, purple, yellow, orange, thinking that, we pasty white guys are the problem. They keep telling the whole country that white nationalists or white supremacists are the problem. I got news for you. Remember that Azimov brigade over there in the Ukraine? A bunch of young white guys, white supremacists, and Nazis. Guess who founded the group? Guess who funded them? The wealthiest Jewish man in the Ukraine. He was so wealthy, he was well known. He's the one that backed them and founded them. Now you tell me if that's not ironic. Oh, and what did all of those units have in common with the military, I believe, or I suspect? They had this little bitty symbol on the bottom of the medallion for the brigade. This little tiny symbol. And what was that the symbol of? Ancient Khazaria. Very important. So they're mixing things up, and I've said they're playing Jews and Nazis in the Ukraine. Well, it turns out that it's really weird, and it's quite true. And you have to remember that those two groups work together. As much as you don't want to admit that, as much as you don't want to believe that, it's quite true. They work together. You can even find a coin that was minted up to show that amalgam. I don't own one. They're readily available. It has the star of, well, whatever star it is. They want to tell you the Star of David, which never existed. Star of Remphan is all that's mentioned in the Bible. But it's got that six-pointed star on it. On one side, and what's it got on the other side? The swastika? I think there's got to be other names for that, by the way, because the Buddhists use that symbol I believe it's in the opposite perspective, so it might be going in the opposite direction, if you will. So those little windmill parts of it, if you will, those broken parts of it, of the windmill, are going in the opposite direction. I have to look at that someday. I'm not sure, but I was surprised when I was in Taiwan to see at the base of Buddha the Nazi symbol. I'm sorry, it was a shock to me. So things most certainly aren't what they seem on this planet. We humans are kind of a peculiar bunch. Expect the unexpected. All of these politicians are working to divide America as much as possible. That's what their job is. That's what the bankers put them up to. The FBI is behind most of these extreme movements. You may think not, but they are. They've actually started them, not merely infiltrated them, but they're leaders. The leaders of a lot of these extreme religion and whatever movements have been FBI agents quite often, on the FBI payrolls, quite often deep undercover. I mean, the guy that did Posse Comitatus, he worked for the FBI. We're thinking that some of these other calls, these rally calls to defend freedom, were false flags as well, designed to draw patriots out so that these FBI could identify who these people prone to real patriotism were. It's kind of like the Roman Catholic Church Grand Inquisition was designed to draw out the real Christians so they could identify them and kill them. Yeah, things are as they seem. My advice to you is, if you know of anything that's pushing for violence, stay the hell away from them. You know, remember, rebellion will not be blessed. Self-defense will be blessed. And there's a tremendous difference between rebellion and self-defense. I mean, it's not like there's a fine line between it and you're suddenly from one to the other. But it certainly looks like people are turned that way today. The mass shooting in Buffalo, I don't trust that report. I think we had a kid that was probably really vulnerable, mentally unstable, and they've probably been working on him for years to get him to crack up and go do that sort of thing. There was a kid in Indiana whose parents were pissed off because their 21-year-old boy was in California and he was being handled between the FBI and the CIA. They were trying to turn him into a mass murderer. They were trying to turn this unstable young man who was mentally ill into a shooter. And the parents protested and went to bat for him. That wasn't that long ago. So I don't trust this government at all. They won't give us the records. They won't give us honest money. They won't give us any justice. And when I was growing up, 1 out of every 7 of us was working in the auto industry or for the auto industry. So 1 out of every 7 of us worked in transportation somehow, in some capacity. Today, my guess is that the biggest employer is the government, the snitch system, and I'll bet that there's more than 1 out of every 7. It's probably 1 out of every 5 work for the man. In one capacity or another. We have become the bully on the planet. When communism fell in Russia, it was on that side of the wall, not this side. We have got more communists here in this country than they have in Russia. We have more communists in government than what they have over there. I mean, look at Bernie Sanders. Is he a communist? Yeah, he's a communist. Look at where everything is pointed. Look at the vector, if you will, of all of those programs that come out of the State Department. Yes, the senator was right. We were rife with communists, just filled up to the gills, maxed out with communists everywhere, and they were helping call the shots. They actually protected mainland China from Taiwan from Formosa at one time when the Taiwanese were going to invade, and they were going to win. Chiang Kai-shek was going to go invade the mainland, and they were going to win. What did we do? We put our 7th Fleet, stationed our 7th Fleet between the island and the mainland, thereby enabling and protecting the Red Chinese. And then look at what happened with Patton. Patton was ready to just roll in and take care of Berlin, but they purposely rolled him out in a slow fashion, and he knew it, and he couldn't do anything about it. They purposely rolled him out in a fashion so that most of Europe would become communist when it wasn't necessary. And I'll tell you the crazy thing. All of those tank commanders, all of those generals that he beat, that surrendered to him, they took prisoner, they were begging him to let them fight. They wanted to fight, and they wanted to fight under Patton. And they said, we'll lead the way, we'll go out front, we'll take the hits, just give us a chance, because they knew who their enemy was at the time. Now, as far as this current war, and I'm going overtime today because you need to hear this stuff. As far as this current conflict that's going on, Germany's been targeted again. See, folks, don't look at the surface dynamics. Look at the inner dynamic for this. And the inner dynamic is Germany's being destroyed even further. You got to remember that German means genuine. And the tribe of Judah, generally speaking, became the Germanic peoples. And remember, part of the sentence, if you will, or curse if you won't, whatever, was that we would forget who we were, and instead of being called by our father, would be called by his father. So who was Israel's father? Who was Jacob's father? Isaac. So we became known as Saxons. Okay? Saxons are real Israelites. All right, you can say once removed, but we're the real deal. They're going after Germany again, and they're going to do their best to destroy German industrialism. Now, the Krauts are really smart people. They're a good people and a noble people. And I'm certain that they will realize, at least they'll realize before the month of June is over, that the United States is willing to sacrifice their industry and everything else. Got to combat global warming, boys and girls. Yeah, right. They want to destroy German industrialization. It'll be the final blow for Germany, pretty much. They've already destroyed American industrialization. Every one of those politicians that gave this nation away over the decades should be dug up out of the grave and charged with treason. And I think that we need to figure out what the payoff was for them, and we ought to go collect. And I don't mind collecting from their heirs at this point, because we have to put an end to this bullshit, an end to this nonsense on the planet. We have to take this war machine apart. The bankers have caused the Great Divide. They use the FBI. The FBI sends people out there supposedly under the guise of, just getting intelligence on these groups. They end up starting things. Now, look at this trial on those poor guys that got suckered into trying to kidnap Whitmer, who's not worth a damn. I mean, what a waste of time and energy. They should just annoy the bitch and let her go away. Instead they talk foul about her. Well, what they didn't realize is that the FBI was leading them into this trap. They wanted to set this thing up, another kind of a false flag, if you will. And so those boys, for the most part, were FBI agents. Most of them, like 15 or 16 of them, were FBI dudes. Only maybe 4 or 5 weren't. They were just foolishly going along with this other thing. And of course, they're trying to set that up, and they're trying to protect the identity of the FBI agents. Hey folks, we got to get rid of these secrets, especially when it comes to police and FBI. Now, since you stayed this long, I'll tell you a little something. we have a police problem. We should be policing ourselves. And we do that with the militias. That's what we were given originally. We had the militias. Every able-bodied man was a member of the militia. And it was a voluntary thing, and we provided our own armaments, our own, ammunition. We did that all. That was self-rule. They took our militias away in 1902. We need our militias to deal with what's coming, what they're going to put off on us. We need the militias. They should be underneath the governors. They should be totally independent, not subject to any federal oversight, and they should be doing what they were dictated, delineated, what was expressly written in the Constitution, that they would quell insurrections and defend our borders, defend against invasions. And you shouldn't be able to stop them from doing that, because that's what the Constitution says. And the only time the word necessary is mentioned in the entire Constitution was in the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the safe and orderly conduct of society. Do you trust these police? I don't want police contact. I'm sorry. I see you guys out there. I get police discounts because I'm retired corrections. Okay, fine. But the problem is you guys have been bent out of shape, and you're not centered anymore. Your heart's not quite in the right place. Your training removes you from that. My God, they even put you on black uniforms, the symbol of the evil empire, which only fits. There's no blue anymore. So don't tell me there's a thin blue line. It's a bunch of bullshit. I met a gentleman a while back, and he was an odd fellow. And he was a millwright. Hell, I didn't even know what a millwright was. I still don't think I know what a millwright is, but a millwright really deals in some specific stuff. Without millwrights, you don't get plants laid, heavy industry and machinery done, because that stuff has to be done to really as close to perfection as possible. And this fellow explained to me about how addicting forward combat was, how invigorating it was, and how he would cross the country in a heartbeat if he was called to work and serve with his brothers again. And he had a proposal, and his proposal is this, and every police officer should hear this. He proposed, yes, we will protect the police, and we will give them this, limit them from liabilities, all kinds of stuff that doesn't exist. Give them these special privileges. But, he says, we need a law. If a police officer lies, it's the death penalty. Now think about that. Because we take a police officer at his word, regardless of anything. But I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's an idea that's come. I think we need to have the police accountable. And if the police are lying on their reports or lying to the people they're supposed to protect, then they should forfeit their lives. That's what the proposal was. And this guy was upset because he was hanging out in Arizona and working, and he had gone down to Tempe, gone down to the university where all the chicks are, where all the babes are. And he was watching the girls. He was girl watching and minding his own business. However, he did have his .45 service armament strapped to his side openly. He's armed up. It's legal. Somehow or other, the police were called that there was this creep, if you will. I don't know what the report really was. I'm just imagining things on this part of it. Because all I did is listen to this guy. I didn't ask him any questions. And he had 4 or 5 cops, demanding stuff and making false accusations about him. Now, he's just down there looking. I can't blame him. I went down there looking one time myself, back when I was considering a position working for the university as a psychologist. They were advertising. What was the problem? The suicide rate among co-eds was really high, and they didn't know what to do about it. And I decided to go down there to observe and get a little bit of an idea. I wasn't so sure I wanted to take the job. And I didn't want the job because the structure of it was flawed, fatally flawed. It was going to result in more harm, not less harm. Dumbasses. Stay away from me and my kind. Most psychologists are dumbasses. Don't let them do that shit to you. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Well, this co-ed suicide rate, and that's pretty serious when a woman kills herself. And these girls were killing themselves with some means that only men were known to be using beforehand. They were hanging themselves. I mean, that's a pretty serious committed suicide. And they wanted somebody to help. And of course, when I found out the structure of their bullshit program, because they got little minds, these communists just don't think very well. And these libtards can't think past their own noses. They don't understand jack. Don't go to a liberal for treatment. You'll get fucked up. That's all there is to it. A person with liberal values shouldn't be treating. And of course, they'll tell you you have to do their stuff because you have to, whatever. I don't know. They try to claim that they want coexistence, but they don't want coexistence. They want to dominate and rule. This coexistence stuff is bullshit. It's crap. I see that bumper sticker and it makes me angry because those people want to destroy us. They don't want to just coexist. They're destroying our families, our children, destroying us directly as fast as they can, and mostly indirect means. Silent weapons or silent wars. The war between good and evil is not getting all that much attention. Maybe our enemy needs to give us more grief so that we would have to toughen up and rise up and take care of business and get rid of them once and for all. In my opinion, listen to these Democrats talk about how Republicans are the problem. They have to be gotten rid of. Well, gee whiz, I think the opposite's true. If we got rid of the Democrats, made the party illegal, got rid of all these Democrat voters, and just took the Republican Party and divided it up into a bunch of parties, we'd probably have a decent system here. But I don't trust the Republicans. They're just another wing of a dirty bird. They're all members of the Communist Party. And that Mitch McConnell's got to go by the wayside. He's got investments in the Ukraine too, like a lot of them do. Him and I don't know if he's got children invested in it, but he's invested over there. And the most important thing isn't the war in the Ukraine. Let Putin do what he has to do to that place and leave it alone. The most important thing is that imbecile in the White House, that jackass who's purposely destroying us, or should I say the imbecile who's not in the White House, but who's running the show anyway, that Barack Insane Hussein Obama. Look up Barack in the Bible, God's instrument, the CIA operatives. I don't know if he chose his name himself, changed it from Barry to Barack, or if the CIA did that for him. I don't know, but he's a CIA operative. As far as I'm concerned, he's total traitor material. Anyway, back to the story. Four or five officers descended upon him and put their hands on their weapons, threatening him. Now, he's in an alley, I think. What he described was like an alley, just off to the main street, just standing there minding his own business. And these guys are making false accusations about him. And he put his hand on his gun, too. The man was ready to go. The man I'm talking to is telling me the story. And then up comes a state police officer. Busts through these officers, these errant imbeciles with their hands on their guns. And he says, Staff Sergeant, not just Sergeant, Staff Sergeant, so-and-so, how are you doing? What's going on? And those officers, they had to stand down because he walked up there right in the middle, up there and shook the guy's hand. And that state police officer ended up calling those police officers lying son of a bitches. I think he used harder words than that, actually. And he called them liars. And he told them, he says, you don't know what you were up against. I know this man. I've seen him shoot. At least 3 of you would have been dead before you got him. He's that good, and he doesn't give a shit. He would have taken you all on, and at least 3 of you would have been dead on the ground before he went down. And stupid sons of a bitches. So this gentleman's suggestion is we make it a capital crime, punished by death, not punishable by death, but mandatory death sentence on any police officer that lies. Now, police officers lie all the time in their reports or when they're interviewing subjects. We're not citizens, we're subjects. Subjects of interest. We're all criminals in their eyes. Their perspective's totally wrong. I think once we get the militia back and the militia can step in, the police are going to be greatly relieved because they're going to have more backing. They're going to be safer. But we got to get them out of these black uniforms back into the traditional blue that comes from Roman times, that comes from nature, the symbol of poison, the warning sign. Folks, makes my heart flutter here a little bit. We got a cop problem. We really do. And Mesa's not the worst police in the valley. And Arizona's not a good state. It's best regarded as a territory. It's corrupt as hell. I don't trust any of it. Can't wait to be gone from this damn area. It's just not a safe place. The jurisdiction, the laws, they got the dumbest legislators writing the dumbest legislation in the world here. Just dumb. And they put up with people that certify elections knowing that they're not kosher. Wasn't kosher. That's all there is to it. So go ahead. You want to censor me for saying the election wasn't kosher? It wasn't kosher. People have no faith in that election. And Arizona is so fucking corrupt that it's not even mentioned as far as having the evidence and all that. It's way too corrupt here. And it's so twisted and things are so upside down that we got a guy who's attorney general who's being hawked by a guy who's supposed to be a conservative. So he's hawking this Democrat as a conservative. No such thing. But of course, that guy from the liberal media is nothing more than Mockingbird media. And he's not conservative at all. He's all for big government on the Republican side. Folks, if you want your rights, if you want freedom, you want liberty, then you have to cut government down in size. You don't ask government for anything. You don't take free stuff. You don't ask the government to intervene and regulate so that you can get rid of your competitors. America's a dirty country. America's the bully of the earth. You don't know how much Americans are hated till you travel abroad. I wouldn't travel abroad these days. Now, it wasn't always that way. In the 50s and 60s, we were the saviors. We were the good guys. However, our leadership was not good, not even then. The leadership's totally controlled. I go into it more, but I just want to cut this short at this point. This is the longest I've ever gone. I think that that backing the police, the way that Trump wants to back them, death penalty if you kill an officer, okay, fine. Death penalty if an officer lies. I think that's a fair exchange. But we need more than anything our militias. Well-organized militias. We need to return to self-rule. There's good psychological reasons for that. For one, a man wants to be in good standing in his community. And if he can't be a member of the militia because he's not been a good boy, that's embarrassing. You know, there's a lot to be said about camaraderie, even if it's drinking buddies. So what? Oh, and by the way, women never should have gotten the right to vote because they took away alcohol. They did prohibition. And we can rightfully say that women's right to vote gave us organized crime. The government became more criminal. They poisoned the alcohol in the name of temperance, in the name of abstinence. They killed American citizens. They poisoned the alcohol and caused people to die because of some stupid amendment that shouldn't have been allowed. When you federalize voting, that's a problem. It's a state's thing. When you federalize abortion, that's a problem. It's a state's thing. And when you federalize marriage, that's a problem. It's a state thing. And I think it actually belongs in the churches within the states. Read your Bibles. Remember the greatest president of all who's running the show from behind the scenes today, talking about flyover country, and the Americans cling to their guns and to their Bibles. It's easy to cling to your gun. We've got a lot of people that think owning them takes care of them. No, man, you just don't own a gun. It's a way of life. Same with the Bible, though. You just can't own it. You got to read it. It's got to be a way of life. If you read the Bible, you'll be less prone to being deceived. And what did Yahshua command us? He said, hold your ground. Be not deceived. Yeah, I had a brain fart, okay? Hold your ground and be not deceived. Barack Obama says, cling to your guns and to your Bibles. Yeah, Barack told us we weren't a Christian nation anymore, and he's actually quite right. This stuff that's preached from the pulpits is not the truth that's in the Bible. You have to read it. It takes some pressing into it. When you get to my level, you start to see things so differently, and things unfold in front of you, and it's just, wow. I mean, it's incredible. I have trouble believing what I'm seeing at this point. We're so far off the mark, it's not funny. So stop fighting over money. There is no money. They stole all the money. The bankers did that. They did that with the help of the Congress. The Congress violated the Constitution in 1913. And so they own you, everything, including you and me. Your birth certificate is actually traded on the stock market. Mine's still out there too. They have monies held in trust for us that they don't ever tell us about because they don't want us to claim it once we become an adult, and they don't want us to understand the method to claiming it either. And it's a lot of money. And they're using that to pay off the local politicians so that they can make money. So it's a system of slavery. And these governments aren't going to help you break out of it, not even your state government or your county government. Why? Because they've all been incorporated. And the corporations are all under Rome, under canon law. So what do I want you to do? Buy my Bibles. Read them. You got questions? Put them up in the comments. Let everybody see them. If I can answer them, fine. If it's bullshit, I'll say it's bullshit. Maybe somebody else will provide the answers. Maybe I'll get to learn something, because that's what turns me on. There's nothing more I like than good company, good conversation, and good food. I don't get much of that anymore these days. Sure would like to have some of that. It's longest ever, folks, and I apologize for it. Hope you got something out of this.